Welcome back, everyone. As we mark 2 years of President Bola Tinubu's administration, we're taking a closer look at economic policies and the state of the petroleum sector, from the removal of the fuel subsidy to ongoing reforms in the energy landscape. The past 2 years have been marked by bold decisions aimed at stabilizing Nigeria's economy and attracting investment. But how have these policies fared? What impact have they had on inflation, cost of living, and the lives of everyday Nigerians? Tonight, to unpack the gains, the challenges, and the path forward for Nigeria's economy and petroleum sector, we're speaking to economist Kaido Ideji, who joins us virtually, and economist and CEO of Dairy Hills Limited, Kelvin Emmanuel. He joins me here live in our studio. Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us. Welcome to Politics Tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Right, so let me start with you before we bring in Mr. Ideji. 2 years into President Bola Tinubu's administration, how would you assess the state of the economy?
Well, President Tinubu, to be fair to him, took over office when, things were very hard.
Okay.
And he had to make very tough choices. When Tinubu took over in 2023, CBN was technically insolvent. But not many people know this.
Okay.
They had swaps of over $10 billion to external asset managers. They had FX forwards of $7 billion. Nigeria had a black market premium of over 30%. Nigeria was on the list of countries owing IATA Airlines. Nigeria had about over $800 million in terms of capital remittances. And Nigeria was number 4, I think number 3 or number 4 globally. And, interest rates was over 20%, double digits. The cash reserve ratio was 32.5%. Fuel subsidy was nearing 8 trillion naira a year. NMDPRA claims, and I don't believe them, because I believe that Nigeria's actual daily consumption is not more than 30 million liters a day. NMDPRA claims that Nigeria's daily consumption was 70 million liters a day. Now, the same NMDPRA has reduced it to 49.8 million liters a day. I don't think it's more than 30 million liters. So he had tough choices to make. It's either he declared bankruptcy and default on Nigeria's debt, like Ghana did, which would have, been catastrophic for Nigeria, because Nigeria would have lost all its creditworthiness. Or he removed the subsidy on Forex. Okay. Nigeria was paying FX subsidies of more than $300 million per month. Removed the subsidies on FX, collapsed the exchange rate, and moved from a managed, like a fixed peg, where the central bank was operating a plus or minus 30 naira per day, to a managed float, and now a B matching system that Bloomberg manages. That even if you've seen FX revaluation of, Nigeria's FX, the FX has dropped, the rate has dropped more than 90% in the last 10 years. You've seen stability in the markets. So the reality is that we can't say we're where we were in 2023.
Okay.
But we're not where we want to be, because per capita income has dropped from like $2,100, it's dropped to $835. So the purchasing power parity, because of FX revaluation, has really dealt a blow to the ability of Nigerians to survive. This is the reality. But he is also taking a tough decision, which no president has been bold enough to take, which is remove the subsidy on petrol. I supported it in 2023. I support it today because it was the right decision.
Okay.
Sections 205 of the Petroleum Industry Act of August 2021 says that the market will move towards a market-based pricing system. And it was based on that premise that you saw the emergence of a midstream sector, and you saw Dangote came into the picture, even if most of 2024 was filled with a lot of rancor in terms of competition, unhealthy competition between NNPC and Dangote, which, you saw, So he's made very difficult decisions that has affected gravely the living standards of Nigerians. Because if you look at the National Living Standards Survey, I don't believe that cost price index is where it is, that MBS is reporting, because I always say that if cost price index is where it is, CBN will crash the MPRO to 19.5%.
All right. So I guess this is the question. If Nigeria was on the verge of going bankrupt, or the economy of the country collapsing, practically collapsing with everything you've said before 2023, how then were we able to cope as a country? Because it looked like the economy was stable. I mean, you hear ordinary Nigerians say, I used to buy a bag of rice for this amount before 2023, now I'm buying it for this amount. What was masking what? What was masking all of this difficulty?
The central bank was paying an FX subsidy, and the government was also paying a PMS subsidy.
Okay.
That's what was masking it. That is the reality. I know it's very tough reality because, if you go on the street and you ask Nigerians, they'll say, oh, we don't want to hear that. The important thing is that we're buying a bag of rice for 40,000. Now a bag of rice is 78,000. This is their reality.
Yes, I agree.
But the truth is that the government was subsidizing it. Because if you look at development finance, the central bank practically stepped in. The 6th floor at the Central Bank of Nigeria in Abuja, they run development finance department. And they control NISA. So NISA turned from a credit guarantee institution, which is supposed to be to the private sector, to become an institution disbursing loans that could not recover. And you had non-performing loan book of nearly 80% on the book of CBN. And, there were trillions of naira that the CBN cannot recover today, which was funded by Ways and Means violation of sections 38 of the CBN Act, that also contributed to the devaluation of naira. Because the CBN borrowed the federal government of Nigeria $53 billion between 2014 and 2022. The Central Bank of Nigeria violated sections 38, which says that the federal government can borrow 5% equivalent of its real revenues for the previous accounting year, but must retire the books before the end of that year. They call it in accounting, they call it expected credit losses for 12 months. They violated it. They rolled it over. These monies that were borrowed and printed, it was borrowed from the private sector, from the banks. It was taken from public sector CRR, and it was also printed, was not backed by any assets or reserves. And that led to the drop in the value of the naira. Because when you create money into the system that you don't have value to back, the value of the money drops. So the fact that you saw the prices stay, despite the indices pointing to very terrible economics by the previous president, was because they were subsidizing FX and they were subsidizing PMS, and the government was bearing it. I would say it was taking anywhere around 65 to 70% of the budget yearly.
Okay. And that's fair enough, right? Right, because my next question would have been, in a layman language, I want you to help us identify how the removal of subsidy has shaped the Nigerian economy in the last 2 years.
Well, the removal of subsidy, brought, the fact that the midstream sector was created, because before last year, there was no midstream sector in Nigeria. There was upstream and then there was downstream. So you had a system practically where the NNPC was running what they call direct sale, direct purchase, where they lift crude oil FOB, and then the commodity traders they gave crude oil to, based on a phantom daily consumption number that the regulator NMDPRA says we have, delivers back petrol, transportation fuels back to the market that delivered at place. But there was a distortion in terms of the crude oil that they send out and then the PMS that they bring back, because no one knows the actual daily consumption of petrol in Nigeria. So you have a situation where, on paper you see that vessels come into Nigeria, but in reality, the products will not land. It will not land because by law, the regulator is supposed to collect 1% as levy for every liter of petrol that is consumed in Nigeria. So the question I have is, can the regulator come out and show us accounts to back how much levy it collected on NMBPRA, on every liter of PMS that has landed in Nigeria between 2015 to date? Can they come out and show us the records to back it? If they can't show, then it means that there's a lot of distortion between what they claim landed in Nigeria, when you look at the motor tanker vessel report, and what actually landed. You know, and it's the government that pays, because when you give out crude oil that you're supposed to sell, you know, remit to Frontier Business Exploration Fund, return earnings to NNPC, and then dollars that are supposed to be credited to the Consolidated Revenue Fund, given to CBN first for balance of payment, and then the Naira value credited to CRF. You short the government on monies it needs to cover its deficit financing to finance the budget, which brings us back to the fact that the president is having to send a medium-term expenditure framework to the National Assembly to show that over a 3-year period, there's a rolling debt plan to borrow $21 billion at about $7 billion per year to fund deficit financing in the budget.
All right. So I want to ask you, before I go to Mr. Ayedeji, I want to ask you about monetary policy reforms, because, I mean, it's evident that in the last 2 years, this administration has tried to keep prices stable, avoid booms and bursts, financial stability, and, you know, overall avoid excessive debt, if I'm correct. So what impact have exchange rate and monetary policy reforms have or had on economic stability?
Well, to be honest with you, I think I'll score Cardozo and his team 7 over 10. They've done considerably. That's a pass mark. There's a pass mark. They've done well in terms of managing, using all the tools available. The Monetary Policy Technical Committee, Monetary Policy Implementation Committee, cash reserve ratio, liquidity ratio, the interest, how they've managed inflation to interest yield curve, the NPR. You know, what I would always encourage the CBN to look at, you know, is look at the way at which the CRR is managed. Okay. There's over 6 trillion naira of customer deposits in Nigeria that are warehoused at the CBN, because today, at 50% CRR, 50 kobo of every 1 naira deposited in a bank in Nigeria is kept at the Central Bank of Nigeria, and they only started paying interest on that last year. Okay. You know, so I'll say they've done well in terms of managing the exchange rate, in terms of the net foreign exchange reserves, which I don't believe is at $23.1 billion at the CBN reports. Because if it is at $23.1 billion, the Naira will not be experiencing shocks it's experiencing because of drop in the price of crude oil, because the Nigerian Naira is very heavily exposed to the price of crude oil. All right. You know, so I think the weak points that you've seen, the weak point you've seen so far, the fiscal authority has not done well, in my opinion. Wale Edu and his team has not done well in managing their own side of the bargain, in supply side economics. Okay,
that's the Ministry of Finance.
Yes, they've not done very well.
Okay, so what would you consider as the issues or challenges?
So, you know, the mainstay of Nigerian economy, 90% of the FX around the country comes from the oil and gas sector. And I would tell you categorically that the Ministry of Finance does not understand the oil and gas sector today. Okay. I will also tell you that the Ministry of Finance does not know how much crude oil and gas comes to surface on a daily basis. In every producing country around the world, they have what they call an hydrocarbon accounting framework that they use to, on a real-time, monitor the flow rates and the amount of crude oil and gas that comes to surface. I think there is a huge difference between what comes to the wellhead and what gets to terminal. And, you know, the small, you know, vandalization of pipes that leads to 500 barrels, and 700 barrels, and 1,000 barrels there is not what is responsible for losses in hundreds of thousands of barrels. So I think you need to start from the oil and gas sector. Then you need to go to food, because if you look at the cost price index and the basket for calculating inflation in Nigeria, food contributes 60% to the inflation. Absolutely. And Lagos has the highest food inflation in Nigeria, over 45%. Right? So in terms of supply side economics, and because Wale Edun is a coordinating minister of the economy, I've not seen him, you know, move the needle in terms of all the levers he needs to work on. For example, the president created a waiver to bring in rice. But what was the plan as the waiver ended? What was the plan? Are you going to close the loop, keep it open? Rice mills in Nigeria are shutting down because they've invested so much money and cheap price is coming in and is competing with them, and they're not able to compete. What's the plan for supply? I'm not seeing it. All right then.
Let's bring in Mr. Ayedeji. Mr. Ayedeji, good evening to you. If you can hear me, how would you assess Nigeria's economy in the last 2 years? And if you're to analyze the challenges and public sentiment, what are the biggest economic challenges still facing Nigeria?
Okay, good evening, and thanks for having me.
Right, thank you.
I think it's been quite interesting, really. We are on a voyage. We were not sure how things would play out, but from the experience we've had in the last 3 years, I think it's been a fairly rewarding adventure in the sense that if we look at what would have happened if the subsidy was not removed, for instance, if we are still struggling to mint money to pay for subsidy, if we are still struggling with the old system, we would have become bankrupt by now. Government would have grinded to a standstill. So the removal of fuel subsidy has been said was inevitable, and it's yielding very good results, though a lot has to be done. We will not expect government to expand our policy in such a way that the loopholes which we have noticed in the last 2 years, because the policy is not perfect, we expect government to expand that framework, that policy to deal with the consequences. For instance, we've seen that some people are, of course, they are vulnerable. They are struggling to meet the reality of the economy as of today. Government should begin to look at how those people can be taken care of, and we can move on from there. Like I said earlier, the benefits have been enormous. Number one, government has been able to avoid the situation whereby it will become insolvent or bankrupt. Government, as a going concern, can continue to perform its responsibilities to the citizens. And we've had the departure from what we used to have. A situation whereby the president will just tap the CBN governor and say, I need money. We need budget support for state government. Go and meet money. No accountability, no recourse to fiscal responsibilities and all the things we need to take into consideration. So we were moving towards a doom. But we've reversed that now. We are on the path. If we take good advantage of what we have done, the structural changes we've made in the economy, then we are very sure that the economy will experience rapid growth, sustainable growth that will translate to development. And the indices are looking fairly good, not the best they can, but we are somewhere. The state governments are beginning to do a lot of projects. They are borrowing less. They are not keen to borrow like it used to be. They can pay salaries. They can do all kinds of things. The federal government is embarking on very ambitious projects. The Calabar, Lagos Super Highway, and quite a lot of them. So like I said earlier, you would have thought about what it would have been if we were still operating the old subsidy regime. We would have run into a big problem. We would have arrived in Zimbabwe or in Venezuela.
All right then. Thank you very much, Mr. Ideji. Now let's go on a break, and when we come back, we'll expand this conversation. This is Politics Tonight, everyone.
Every weekday on Business Nigeria, we uncover the secrets of the financial world.
We analyze the stock market, shares, bonds, and the thrilling world of cryptocurrency.
Facts matter. Our team dives deep to separate facts from popular opinion.
We simplify complex government policies as it impacts your everyday life, helping you navigate the ever-changing financial landscape.
Watch Business Nigeria every weekday at 2 p.m. only on TVC News. First with breaking news.
Every major news story is with many perspectives and layered with different levels of impact.
Hello. What time did this happen? We will be right there.
At TVC News, we follow the big and major news, gathering the facts, witnessing the outcome.
I am here live at the aftermath of the approval of the new national minimum wage.
We are TV Station of the Year, not just for breaking news, but for being first, fair and accurate. TVC News, first with breaking news.
Welcome back to Politics Tonight, everyone. Thank you very much for staying with us on the program tonight. As we mark 2 years of President Bola Tinubu's administration, we're taking a closer look at the economic policies and the state of the petroleum sector. And I have two gentlemen on the program tonight. Economist Kelvin Emmanuel, who is right here in the studio with me. Thank you very much for staying with us on the program. And Kaide Oyedeji, who joins us virtually. Gentlemen, let's move on quickly. But let me continue with you, Mr. Oyedeji. In clearer terms, which sectors of the economy have seen the most growth or resilience during President Tinubu's 2 years? Are there any specific areas where you see promising development or worrying trends?
I think a key thing is that we are beginning to experience peaceful stability. We have moved away from an era of extreme vulnerability, where the institutions of government had become very weak. The tiers of government were quite weak. We had a situation before now, like I said earlier, state government, the subnationals could hardly stand on their own. They were rushing to Abuja to beg the former president for support. And each time they went there, they would get something they called budget support, which was an abnormality on its own. No planning, no fiscal planning. They just dump the money on them. They spend it to survive, to stay alive. So if you look at it very well, a key benefit is that we've been able to survive that era. We are in a new era whereby virtually every arm of government, every tier of government really can stand on its own and can perform its responsibility and can build on what we have. And this has helped them to develop their infrastructure, not exactly what we want, not exactly where we should be, but we are beginning to have a sense of performance that if we're able to sustain this, if we're able to reduce the leaks within the economy, the corruption, the lack of focus, the frivolous spendings within the system, we'll be able to make a lot of gains. And also, you'll notice that we've been able to invest more in agriculture. We saw what Niger State did last year, and we are hoping that other states will emulate this and even build on it. We expect Niger State to also do more. We expect other states to follow suit. So agriculture has received a boost, and that's showing in the level of income that sector has generated, especially in the last 12 months. We hope this will be sustained. Education will get the right attention. We've seen improved funding in that sector, and we've seen more intervention in that sector through with NEFund, the loan scheme to students. And by and large, we are beginning to see the economy emerging in such a way that if we are able to sustain it, we'll be able to, each sector will be able to stand on its own, and each sector will be able to perform creditably well. I said that with a condition: if we're able to sustain it. Right. You will recall that in the past we've had what we called oil windfall, about $12 billion at the point, and everything was filtered away, no benefits. We've had structural adjustment programs within the economy, and we had no results. At the end of the day, the entire benefits, the proceeds, were spirited into God knows where. So we are hoping this experience will be as bad as what we had in the past, which led to terrible failure and backwardness for the economy. We are hoping that what we are doing now would be aggregated for the development of key sectors of the economy, especially infrastructure, agriculture, and the social support system.
All right, then. Thank you, Mr. Oyedeji. I'll come back to you. So he just talked about the sustainability of these economic reforms. So looking forward, what do you see as the key priorities to sustain or improve economic performance?
First of all, I think there's a moral hazard. And the moral hazard is you can't be asking Nigerians to tighten their belt when there is profligacy.
Okay.
I'll use that word. Mr. President has not shown that he is really heavy on fighting corruption. And I'll give an example.
Please do.
I've been on the show a few times and I've talked about the fact that Warri and Port Harcourt were never working. On the 12th of August 2021, FEC approved a memo for NNPC to raise finance, to do turnaround maintenance for Port Harcourt, Warri and Kaduna. And they approved $2.96 billion. And the first loan they got was from a multilateral development bank. The second loan was from a trader, $450 million, total of about $1.5 billion. Evidence has shown today that those refineries are not working. Warri is not working. Port Harcourt is not working. I don't want to go into...
What we heard was that Port Harcourt refinery was working.
Port Harcourt refinery was working? When? Where? It's not working. Because the records show that in the intervening period that NNPC claims that Port Harcourt and Warri were working, they were still importing petrol heavily. So why would your refinery be working and you're importing the same time? At least Dangote is in Lagos here. We can see what he's doing. We can see evidence of supply to the market. NNPC cannot show you evidence of supply from Warri or Port Harcourt. So if $1.5 billion has been flushed down the drain, why is Mr. President not asking EFCC to prosecute the people who were in charge when this turnaround maintenance was done? That is $1.5 billion.
You think Mr. President should do that?
Mr. President should ask the anti-corruption agents to prosecute them to the letter of the law.
Okay.
Why does one standard apply for some people and other people, are not, those standards are not applying for them? Look, $3 billion was commissioned for that project, 618 kilometers. Nigeria has the highest cost per kilometer for gas transmission pipelines in the world. And I'm saying to Bayo Ojulari, why don't you audit the process of this contract, this EPC? Gas transmission pipelines anywhere in the world doesn't cost more than $1.2 to $1.5 million. Nigeria's cost per kilometer is more than $30.5 million. And still they've not been able to complete it in 6 years.
All right.
Why is the president not asking? This is the moral hazard. This is moral hazard. Because investors are watching all this. Why is the president not asking EFCC and ICPC to investigate and prosecute the people who were in charge of the waste of natural resources?
I don't think it should be why is the president not. I don't think it should be why is the president not. I think it should be the president should.
The president should. Okay. That's the question. So, because one of the major metrics by which investors judge whether they should come to an economy or not is equity and the rule of law. So standards should not apply for Yahoo boys who are being prosecuted, rightly so, right? And the people who have been in charge of sabotaging Nigeria's economy over the last several years, are not being prosecuted. So this is the moral hazard. So in talking about what can be done, we need to focus on this issue of the rule of law and justice, because I'll tell you easily that between 2019 and 2024, about $14.5 billion was borrowed through forward sale agreements, and Nigeria's crude oil that should have gone to funding the budget was used as securities to back those loans. How were those monies used? How were they used? So if for the refinery, for gas pipelines that has not been completed until today, every time they tell you it's at 71%. For drilling in Komani, Bauchi, and in Chad basins, that $3 billion has gone down the drain and nothing has come out of it, and you're looking at easily anywhere around maybe $8 billion that has gone down the drain. Mr. President is not saying this is a serious threat to Nigeria's economic security.
All right, because what I knew about the Port Harcourt refinery, where it was working and supplying fuel according to its capacity. Yes, I mean what it supplies may not be enough for daily consumption, but it was working or is working.
Port Harcourt does not have a functional catalytic reforming unit.
We'll come back to the petroleum sector because we're supposed to spend about 10 minutes of it.
If you look at the Bank of Industry, look at the Bank of Agriculture, I don't know why you have so many of these development institutions that are disjointed, when you can bring them together and use them to provide a credit guarantee to financial institutions, to provide what they call invoice discounting to cooperatives, to work together to increase supply, because you need the supply economics is what is missing from the equation. The CBN is doing its work.
All right.
The fiscal side is not pulling the weight it's supposed to pull. And when you end up in a situation where you don't have the barrels to sell to stabilize your FX for balance of payments, and you don't have the naira to cover your deficit loop, and you have to borrow money, then you have a problem. I'll tell you one major step that has been done that I'll say is the most consequential and is progress.
Okay.
The tax reform, the 4 tax reform bills that has passed that is waiting for accent by Mr. President is a masterstroke. It will definitely raise the tax to GDP ratio of Nigeria significantly.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Ideji, let me come to you. May 20th, the Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank concluded its 300th meeting. I want you to speak to the rationale, market expectations, and transmission therefore effects on the economy. First, I'm interested in how maintaining all key monetary parameters is capable of stabilizing the economy. Retain the monetary policy rate at 27.50%.
Well, my colleague in the studio has said it all. There is a little to what the Monetary Authority can actually do. All things being equal. The MPC has been retained at its current rate because we still have the challenge of inflation. It's coming down, but not as aggressive as is expected. So current rate has to be maintained. While we do the main work has to be in the fiscal side of the economy. We are still not producing as much as we need to do. We still have a lot of imperfection within the supply chain of agriculture, which we have to deal with. So as long as these things remain there is a little to which the CBN can do. They were constrained to keep the rate at its current position so that they can ensure that inflation rate, as it's coming down, they don't create problem for the monetary system.
All right, just like I asked. All right, just like I asked Mr. Kelvin, what steps should this administration take to ensure the economic gains reach ordinary Nigerians? Because I'm not sure Nigerians are after or understand these grammars.
Yes, I said earlier that they need to expand that policy. The most important thing is that we've seen the consequences of the removal of fuel subsidy. We've had some people struggling with it. There's no way you can remove subsidy entirely from the economy. You remove the subsidy on fuel, you remove the subsidy on energy, on electricity and all that. It's got to a point whereby some government institutions could not even afford electricity. We had a situation whereby a major teaching hospital had to practically shut down because it could not provide electricity. So we are expecting government to expand that policy, begin to introduce selective intervention where necessary. For instance, government should have a scheme that will accommodate the teaching hospitals where they can't afford it. Government must be able to intervene. Then in agriculture, we must increase the level of subsidy which we have in that sector in terms of the cost of fertilizer, in terms of providing basic equipment, mechanized agriculture, making them available at the least affordable cost. Bringing down the cost of production is very key. Then making sure that logistics, cost of transportation for goods and services from one area to the other is worked on. So he has also talked about security, which is a key thing. If government can invest more, deploy more resources into protecting the different areas of the economy, making the forest guard, for instance, to take up and taking up effectively, creating it, making it in such a way that they can connect effectively to the grassroots, so that people can return to the farm, boost productivity. At that point, they'll begin to see decline in inflation, and the work of the Monetary Authority will become easier than what we have now.
So on the issue of sustainability, do you think the current economic trajectory under President Tinubu is sustainable?
What it is, and I will paint a scenario here. I don't see any government coming in after President Tinubu. I assume President Tinubu will be there for 8 years. I don't see anybody coming in after that and reversing any of these key policies. All they can do is to build on it, enjoy the benefits, and making sure that they consolidate on whatever achievement this government would have achieved. For instance, you don't see a government that will come in and say, I'm bringing back subsidy on fuel. It seems that has gone, and it has gone for forever as it is. So I don't see any government coming in and altering most of those key reforms.
All right, then. So same question as we wrap up tonight. Do you think the current economic trajectory on the President Tinubu is sustainable?
So, Mr. President needs to first show Nigerians that what he's telling them to do, he's willing to do it. He needs to cut down the size of government. He should. The Stephen Orasanyo report is sitting in the office, currently sitting in the office of the SGF, George Akume. I'm urging Mr. President to ask his SGF to bring a recommendation for the Stephen Orasanyo report to be implemented, cut down the size of government. This government is the is the biggest, most bogus size that you've had because of political permutations and you wanting to balance all the 6 geopolitical zones, right? Look, Nigeria needs fiscal federalism, not federal character. We practice this politics of compensation and settlement for too long, and it's not working.
Isn't that our reality as a people?
It's not our reality. We have to choose what we want. Jumoke, we have to choose what we want. Do we want to keep settling and compensating people, or do we want to grow economically? We can't have the two at the same time.
But are Nigerians ready for that change?
Well, you know, this debate about equity and fiscal federalism, it came up during the tax debate. Because the principles of derivation on states, landmass, population, equity of states, IGR, and derivation, which are the 5 principles by which Revenue Mobilization and Fiscal Allocation Committee shares federal allocation. It came up during the tax debate. And unfortunately, it was politicized. But Mr. President is the president because he has the political power to make the decisions he has to make. He won't be president forever. He has to make the tough decisions that has to be made in the interest of the future of Nigerians now. Fiscal federalism and not politics of settlement and compensation should drive the economic decision making for moving Nigeria forward. I'll put it that way.
All right. Thank you very much. It's a good place to leave this conversation. Kelvin Emmanuel, Kaide Edeji, thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us on Politics Tonight. Thank you so much. And thank you very much for...
Leave that impact, your guide